3 by 10 versus 10 by 3. Is there really a significant difference between the two? In this video today, I'll be comparing and contrasting both set and rep ranges and letting you know what the differences are in terms of strength, size, power, etc. So let's start breaking that down. In terms of muscle gains, on the surface level, you might think that these are totally different things because the 3 by 10 is the hypertrophy rep range, right? You're working with reps of 10, you're filling the muscles, you're fatiguing it. That's just going to make it grow much more than doing 10 triples, right? At least that's what you think. But in reality, it's actually producing the same amount of muscle hypertrophy, okay? See, if you take 75% of your 1 rep max and you do 10 by 3 or 3 by 10, you're actually doing the same amount of stuff. It's the same exact workload. There's no difference. And as a result, you're going to gain the same amount of size. And I'm not the one who's inventing this, by the way. This has been proven in studies. If you look at Brad Schoenfield, I think it was 2014, he posted a study where he was comparing high sets, low reps versus low sets, high reps. And the conclusion was that there was no difference at all in terms of hypertrophy. So what happened then? What was the differences? Well, it was strength related. It was strength and performance related. The guys who did the 10 by 3 or whatever set and rep range they used gained much more strength than the guys who did 3 by 10. The only thing is that it took a little bit longer to do the sets, which is to be expected, obviously, and they got more powerful out of it. But in terms of muscular hypertrophy, there's no difference. This has been proven in studies, okay? And I've been saying it for years. Total workload is what counts. So when someone tries to tell you, oh, hypertrophy rep range, 8 to 12 reps, they don't know what they're talking about. It's volume accumulated over time, workload in the session. That's what's going to give you gains. So if you use a multitude of different rep ranges, like you go maybe 6 to 8, 8 to 12, 15 to 20, 4 sets to 25, using all these rep ranges in one session, you're going to gain all the muscle you need. There's no difference. Like 6 sets of 5 is the same thing as 3 sets of 10 in terms of workload. If you're using the same percentage of your 1 rep max, you're not going to notice any differences size-wise, right? That's why guys have to stop with this hypertrophy rep range crap. So size-wise, there's no difference. All right, so now that we covered the hypertrophy stuff, you know that there's no difference workload-wise if you're using the same percentage of your 1 rep max. How come there are strength differences, as shown by Brad Schoenfield and a lot of other strength athletes? Well, let me talk about that right now. First thing you have to understand is that whenever you go above 3 to 5 reps or so, fatigue starts kicking in and bar speed slows down. Now, this has significant effects on how explosive you could be. If your bar speed is slowing down, obviously you're not being as explosive as you could be. So if you're not as explosive as you could be, well, you're bleeding out strength gains on the table. So the net result is that if you do a 3 by 10, you'll get less total reps than a 10 by 3, typically. It's going to be a lot harder to get 3 by 10 than 10 by 3. Even though the workload might be the same in the end, the fact is that when the bar speed slows down, you're less explosive, less powerful. That's what happens, right? So that has significant effects on strength. You see, in all sport, you want to be as explosive as possible. You want to develop your rate of force development, how fast you can produce force. When you're doing these high rep sets, you're fatiguing yourself. And this is leading to bar speed slowdown, right? That's going to have significant effects on your performance. And on top of that, you have to understand that the higher the reps go, the more prone you are to technique breakdown. So you're going to bleed out your technique, which means you're going to turn the tension onto different muscle groups. So if you're doing a deadlift, you might turn it on the lower back instead of the posterior chain. If you're doing a squat, you might good morning it. That all happens when you start going above 3 to 5 reps, when you start creeping up in the high rep ranges. So what are you getting from doing these high rep sets? Well, like I said, the volume is the same, workload is the same, but you're bleeding out strength gains, you're bleeding out the explosiveness, and that's what's causing you to become less powerful in the long run. And that could make the difference in terms of how much bigger you can get, believe it or not. You see, if you look at the study by Brad Schoenfield, you'll recognize that there was no differences in terms of size, only strength, right? But here's the thing. I've always said that as a drug-free lifter, in order to get bigger, you must get stronger. You must improve performance. Whether you're doing low sets, high reps, or high sets, low reps, you still gotta progressively overload. There's no way around that. So if I'm doing 20-pound dumbbells, 3 sets of 10 for several years, my biceps will not get bigger unless I improve that weight. So if we know that it's easier to make strength gains on the low reps, high set approach, basically the 10 by 3, wouldn't that be a better recommendation? I mean, why would you not do this option? Sure, it could take you a little bit more time, but why would you not incorporate it in at least 1 or 2 movements in a session? To me, it's only logical, right? Especially when you factor in the technique breakdown, which could be crucial for a competition lift. Why would you not do this? Seriously, let's talk about the bench press. If you start losing technique, you're pretty much, it's a waste of time. In a powerlifting meet, if you do a pause bench, you got to re-explode from the dead stop. So it's actually in your best interest that you don't fatigue during the lift. So this is why dynamic effort benching could be very important, 10 by 3. Same thing for the deadlift. If your speed off the floor is diminished, you're not going to lock the shit out. You see, lockout issues is typically you're not able to pull fast enough off the floor. Now, if you're doing reps of 10 and above, the bar speed is slowing down so much that you can't produce max amounts of force. You're just turning it into a hypertrophy exercise. Like if that's what you want, just do a Romanian deadlift. Do a 3x10 Romanian deadlift. You're going to get all the benefits you need. But explosiveness-wise, you are going to miss out on performance. And that loss of performance is going to cost you size gains, man. So that's where it becomes important. Any exercise where it's dead stop, like a pause bench, I would say the 10x3 is probably better. Because it's going to allow you to get better strength gains in the long run, allow you to become more explosiveness, which means less strength plateaus. And if you have less strength plateaus, that means less muscle plateaus. Okay? And I'm not lying about this velocity thing either. The bar speed slowing down. Just look at Prilepin's chart. Prilepin's chart proves this, that if you go above the ranges that he suggests, the bar speed slows down, the explosiveness goes down, and it's not optimal. And keep in mind, this was taken from over 700 qualified weightlifters, elite weightlifters. So you have to take this information into consideration. So yeah, on the surface, you might say, okay, it's the same 10x3 versus 3x10, it's the same shit because the workload is the same, right? Which obviously that makes sense. And therefore the hypertrophy is the same. But what you're forgetting is that with the 10x3, you're going to get more strength. And if you get more strength, that means less plateaus. The less strength plateaus you have, the bigger you're going to get in the long run. That's just how it works. Like if I take two guys, right? Let's just use our common sense here. One guy could bench 200 pounds, the other guy could bench 200 pounds. You make guy A do 3x10 for 6 months. You make guy B do 10x3 for 6 months. Who do you think is going to be bigger and stronger in the end? Probably guy B, because guy B is going to have all the explosives going for him, right? He's going to have the same amount of workload, but now he's going to have less strength plateaus. So guy A might plateau at a 250 bench, while guy B is now at a 275 bench and still going strong. So in the long run, it's actually beneficial to do the low rep high set approach, 10x3. You see my point? So don't let guys try to tell you that this is exactly the same thing. It's not, because we already know that it's going to give you better strength gains. All right? Now, of course, the message of this video is not to drop 3x10. I am not suggesting that whatsoever. All I'm trying to say is that you should think outside the box. And you should consider using this approach on certain movements. I would especially use it on exercises where technique breakdown is going to be rampant, as well as explosive movements. So any floor press, pause bench, box squat, deadlift, rack pull, block pull, even overhead press, because it's a dead stop, this is where you want to use this method. And I would say use it at least once or twice in a workout. It could be your volume day, and you're going to make terrific gains for it. Any explosive movement. It could even be a pen leg row, all right? So that's what I think of 10x3 versus 3x10. You could, of course, do it on isolation movements as well. You could do it on a curl, but you know, at that point, because it does take a little bit more time, it's just more efficient to do the 3x10 instead. But if you're wondering like what the gains differences are, size-wise, there is none. There is none. You're resetting the motor units every 30 seconds. You're still getting metabolic fatigue because it's a low rest period, you know. The only difference is that there's less bar speed slowdown, you're more explosive, there's less technique breakdown, which is very beneficial for strength and performance. And that's why, if you look at the studies, it does, in fact, prove this. So always remember this. Always remember that as a drug-free lifter, in order to get bigger, you must get stronger. And therefore, if there's one method that gets you stronger than another method, it's probably the preferred way to train, all right? So that's it, man. Just use it on the movements that I talked about. Don't be using it on every fucking exercise. That's not what I'm suggesting. Just be smart about using 10x3, but do realize that size-wise, there's no difference. The only thing you're going to see is strength. And then in the long term, when you factor in that strength, that means less plateaus, which means more muscle gains. So I hope I'm clear with this video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And that's it, guys. Give me your feedback. I'll talk to you all next time.